Loving that Monte Carlo is warm this year as well, because I'm working with a player in a trial right now. You know, he's a great guy. We've gotten off to a good start in our first 3-4 days, and he's got a match starting up on Monday.
We're going to pick 3 players each that we think are going to do well in the clay court season.
She is going to soak that up. She's going to lap that up, and she's going to believe whatever he has to say, even if it's a load of rubbish.
Welcome to Off Court with Greg Rusedski. I'm joined today by Tennis 365 Kevin Palmer and Ashley Neaves, the tennis mentor. We've got to talk about the clay court season this year. This is a big period of the season where players' rankings go up and down, and also finding that transition. You know, I'm in sunny Monte Carlo today. I got my sunglasses on. You know, if you're watching this live on YouTube, I put them on for you for a fraction of a second. Life is good here, much nicer than in the UK, where you two are both at. And we've got to dive into this clay court season, Ashley. And what's really the big thing about the clay court season for the pros compared to the amateurs trying to play on those clay courts?
Nice to see you're in Monte Carlo, Greg. I've been coaching outdoors in the British weather. It was drizzly, rainy. We've got a surface called artificial clay, actually, that we play on, which I might talk about a little bit later. But yeah, when it comes to the transition between the hard court and the clay court season, there's quite a lot to unpack. And I think the most simple way of thinking about it is there are 2 things that touch the surface: your feet and the ball. And if we talk about your feet, you know, naturally movement's going to be different on clay, coming from a hard court surface where you grip to the surface, you can push off quickly, you feel stable, you feel balanced, you know exactly how the ground is going to feel under your feet. When moving on to the clay courts, however, you're playing on crushed bricks, and that surface moves under your feet. And so players, you know, some players do it more naturally than others. We can talk about your experience in a second, Greg, because I know, you know, you've obviously experienced many seasons translating that hard court game onto the clay courts. But yeah, movement becomes a big issue for players. Being able to slide, being able to change direction quickly, to be able to push off from a static position. So movement is one thing. Also, the tennis ball hits the surface, and the way the tennis ball reacts to a clay court is very different to how it reacts to a hard court. The ball on a clay court will grip, it bounces much higher, which you hear people talking about the surface being slower than other surfaces purely because of the fact that it grips and bounces up high. So the ball spends more time in the air with those higher bounces, and it benefits the players that tend to hit with higher arc shape with their ball flight. You see the heavy topspin players doing well on the clay and the slower surfaces because of that bounce. And then tactically, you got to play differently because of that higher bounce. The rallies are going to be longer because the ball spends more time in the air. You've got a lot more time to receive the oncoming ball. But what it means for these players that tend to like big, flat hitting shots is that type of ball doesn't have the same impact that it would on a faster surface. So, you know, players have to adjust their game slightly, playing with more of those arc trajectories, playing with longer rallies. They're going to have to be fitter on the clay courts because it's more physically demanding with the longer rallies. They've got to do more with their shots to make them effective. And so there's a lot to unpack. But I think it's the one thing that makes tennis unique from other sports is there aren't any other sports where you have to change the surface you play on. And I think that's what makes it unique. But Greg, could you tell us a little bit about how you found that transition between the hard court and clay court season? Because it's something that some players do more naturally than others.
Well, it's like the transition for grass or hard court. Some people just feel more naturally on the surface. I think the thing is physically, you have to get a lot stronger because you have to dig your legs into the clay. So that's why usually the physically strongest players usually do the best on the surface because they're willing to grind it out. You have to also learn how to slide into the ball. You have to change your position of return of serve a little bit further back because at times you're still getting bad bounces. This week in Monte Carlo, it's very sunny, it's very hot, so the ball is bouncing higher, it's quicker through the court, so that allows you to serve and volley. Once in a while is a change-up play here. Historically in Monte Carlo, you can have great weather like we're having right now, or it can be raining, heavy, slow clay. So you have to make those adjustments depending on temperature more than any other surface, I believe, because when the clay is wet, it's so hard to make a hole through the court. But if it's lively, bouncing hard, then it's a lot easier. And I like to have usually at least a week to 10 days of preparation on the surface before I play my first event, just to get used to the movement, because the movement with the legs and the sliding is the most challenging. And physically, you got to be willing to step up and play longer points out there as well. So love this clay court season. Loving that Monte Carlo is warm this year as well, because I'm working with a player in a trial right now with Joe Mpechi Paracard, one of the fastest servers in the world. And like, I'm convinced him. He says I like sometimes the clay a little bit slower, but I'm like, no, we love this hot, high bouncing stuff. So, part of coaching is convincing the player to like the surface. And, he's a great guy. We've gotten off to a good start in our first 3-4 days, and he's got a match starting up on Monday. He's got a qualifier in Zverev in the section. So fingers crossed for our debut together as a coaching team with his other coach, Philippe, and his physical trainer, Slavin. So preparation with the whole team from a physical point of view, a mental approach, and also changing the way you play fractionally to adjust to the clay is so important.
Can I ask you a question, Greg, about this? Because, coming in to work with a new player on the ATP tour, it's, it's a big deal. And it's an interesting time of year for you to start with him, because naturally he's going to favour those quicker surfaces. He's going to love the grass court season. So, do you see this as a great opportunity to get to know him, to get to work on things in his game in the season where it's possibly, not his favourite surface, although, as you say, big serves can still benefit on any surface. Do you see this as a good run-up time for him to really be excelling during his favourite season?
Well, I think if you look at it at majors, yes, Wimbledon is his best major, getting to the fourth round. But let's not forget, he's won in Bordeaux and Lyon on clay. So he can play on all surfaces. And for me, I looked at the job and was approached in February. We had discussions. They obviously went with a different coach at the time. And then, obviously I got the call up this past weekend to come down. So for me, I think he can be a player on all surfaces and have good results, because when you're coming into it, you don't want to make too many changes. You're talking maybe about basic things, weight shift, footwork, ideas tactically. And then the time when you have a period where he's either lost or won a tournament, you take time to build the other areas you see in the player's game. And if you look at him, even during the tournament, you're working on certain areas of his games that needs to improve. And, tonight I've got to practice at 6 o'clock, and I get on court and we work on all those areas together. So even during the tournament, you're working on those areas, but you're not making any technical changes during a tournament. And that is the key. If you're making technical changes during an event or prior to events so close, I think that can confuse a tennis player, especially when you're in a new relationship.
Greg, it feels like clay courts have changed a little, would you say? I mean, certainly we hear a lot of the players say that the courts are very similar these days, whatever surface you're on. Is clay different than it was back in your day?
Yeah, definitely. No question about it. So like Monte Carlo is either super slow or super fast. So I'm happy it's faster this week. You go off to Madrid, you deal with the altitude. So the ball sails through the air, again, quick. You go to Munich, if it's raining, it's heavy and slow. Rome is historically very slippery and fast. So weather dependent where they are, they all play a little bit differently because the clay is fractionally different. And also on top of that, if the ball isn't a consistent ball, because some weeks you'll have different balls as well, sometimes they'll react differently. The balls, I have to say, this week are chewing up again like they were in Miami. And, that really favors the guy who plays heavy topspin and so forth. So it's dealing with all the variables and the weather. And I think there's no other surface in the world that you have to deal with so many variables with.
Yeah, and we mentioned before about, it favours different players. And Greg, you mentioned that it very much comes down to physicality. And those players that have been super fit through the hard court season are going to be favoured on the clay. But it's also, I think, nationality makes a difference. In the past, if you look at the most successful clay court players, they tend to be from countries where they grow up playing on clay. A lot of European countries, whereas when you think of Brits and Americans that grow up playing on faster indoor courts or even on grass. So do you think we're going to see any different players this clay court season coming through from, let's say, the Brits or from America?
Well, the one to me is, let's not forget Cam Norrie when he made his debut on Davis Cup against Spain on clay. He won in 5 sets. The guy's engine can go all day. He's a nightmare for anybody on this surface, and he loves to grind. He maximizes everything. Jack Draper last year, finals of Madrid, quick clay court. So temperature plays a lot. When I had my best results, really hot in Paris, made the fourth round, court is bouncing around. If you're playing in Paris on the outside courts, they're small. So if you're big server, aggressive, high bouncing, it saves your game as well. Rome, another week I always loved because it was slippery. So for me, that helped out. So there's conditions, places that really help the attacking player. And in Britain, we don't have clay courts. That's the problem. In Spain and France, all the young kids, the tennis clubs or they're, in the parks, they're clay courts. For us, it's hard courts or it's those slippery AstroTurf things, which is not the best thing for developing technique. The artificial clay is pretty good. It's a lot better than it used to be, but it's where you grow up and where you feel comfortable, or you have to learn how to adapt. Because for me, it's all about footwork. If you're comfortable with your footwork, then you can execute. And let's not forget, Tim Henman had a great run where he made the semis and had a chance against Korea because he was playing flat. He was taking it early. He felt very comfortable with movement. And the best movers are always the ones with the best results. So the better you move and the more comfortable you are sliding on the clay, the better your results are going to be.
Guys, I think we should get into the head-to-heads, if you like, for what we're looking forward to for the next few weeks. And there's so many imponderables in the clay court season. Sinner, Alcaraz look like the two to beat in the men's game, and in the women's game, there's so many question marks we've got at the moment. But I think we should start with Sinner, Alcaraz. You've seen both of them down there this week, Monte Carlo, Greg. What are your thoughts on the balance of power in that rivalry right now? Just looking at a couple of points, Sinner has got only 1,950 points to defend because of his drug ban last year. Carlos has got 4,330. So it looks like the world number one ranking will change hands, possibly in the next week or so. Even that, it could be that quickly. But where do you think the balance of power lies after Sinner won Indian Wells and Miami?
Well, Sinner's on a tear right now. He wants to get back to world number one. He also launched his, I think it was like a YouTube channel with a sponsor where we're seeing behind the life of Yannick Sinner, and it was quite interesting. They asked him about his motorcycle license. And Darren Cahill goes up to him and asks him, how many times did it take you to pass your motorcycle license? Or how many times did you fail it? 3 times. And he's a car nut and a motor nut. But Sinner to me has been impressive. I got here on Wednesday night, and Thursday morning I was at the practice court. Guess who was at the practice court? Yannick Sinner. Basket of balls, Vignazzi, working, double sessioning it up, putting in. He is on a tear. You think a guy who's just won the Sunshine Double would want a little bit of time off? Nah, he's straight at it. He's back on it. For Carlos, this is a natural surface. He probably wanted a little time at home. We heard those comments when he lost his match in Miami. He said, he's not enjoying it quite as much. There's a few little things going on. I think it was refreshing for him to go to home a little bit. And now he's here. I saw him today, and he seems like he's ready to go as well. So there'll be a battle of power there. But right now, I am slightly favoring Sinner from what I'm seeing because of just his confidence, but you never can discount either one of those two guys. And Medi's been in practice, very impressive, trying to take the returns a little bit earlier. Fonseca's here, who we talked about as well, striking the ball beautifully. Sarandula. Musetti's here. He's had some good runs on the clay as well. So this first week is going to be huge for confidence and getting that momentum throughout the clay court season.
Greg, I'm really excited to hear some more of your insights from being out there on the tour. I think it's something very unique. We often talk about form of players, but there's a lot that we don't see. We watch the matches on TV, but we don't see the small details of Yannick Sinner being the first on the practice courts and this sort of thing, and what the vibe is like in their camp. So there's a lot that can be said for that. But when it comes to Alcaraz and Sinner, I can't see past Alcaraz on the clay courts. I just think he's got so many options in his game. And although Sinner's game doesn't look like it should suit clay, he plays incredibly well on it because he's such a good mover. His shots are very much, one-dimensional when you're comparing to someone like Alcaraz, but at the same time, he is just a machine when we're talking about Sinner. But just on the clay, Alcaraz with that drop shot and being able to hit that drop shot from anywhere on the court on that surface, I can't see past Alcaraz. But like Kevin said, he's got a lot of points to defend, and that can change things a little bit.
I don't think he's worried about the points. When you're as good as those two guys, you're worrying about winning every single week you play. That's the ultimate goal. And the greatest tennis match I've witnessed live was last year in Roland Garros finals, Sinner Alcaraz. How many match points did Sinner have? And then the rebound back and win Wimbledon? Incredible. Yeah. Don't discount this weapon, the mind. I'm pointing to my head right now. That to me is the number one ingredient. And Carlos, yes, if you look at the way his shot options, his natural ability on the surface, the way he can change heights and do all those things. But Sinner keeps adding and adding to his game, and he's ruthless, and he's really driven. That's what makes it interesting. And who knows who's going to dominate? You choose at your peril either one of the two. But don't forget the chasing pack. There's guys in the chasing pack who are desperate to get up there as well. And, obviously Draper isn't in Monte Carlo, starts up in Barcelona again. So, for a British point of view, we want to see him doing well. I've watched Cam Norrie in practice sessions this week. He looks like he's a guy nobody wants to play because he doesn't miss and he knows how to work a clay court and he has lungs that can run all day. Berrettini's here with Thomas Inquist. We practiced with Diallo, the Canadian, who's coached by Jonas Bjorkman. So I'm seeing all my old contemporaries back on tour. And that's a lot of fun to be kind of accepted in that social circuit and to have a player you're with as well that you think there's a huge upside and potential for this young man if we can get it right. So, it's great to be on tour and be able to give you guys all these insights that I'm seeing live. And also, if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the beautiful sunshine behind me as well.
Can we move your camera, Greg? Can we just have a little
we
look
can
at
have a
where
little
you're
bit of
actually
a
sat?
look. So, it's not too bad, is it? I think that's Kevin's
Wow.
boat in the background there, but I don't know if we're doing that well yet.
Not yet. Once we get some sponsors, eh?
Ashley, I was going to throw to you about Alexander Zverev. He's got 1,260 points to defend, which is not that many. He's very, very strong on clay. He's been to a French Open final. He's got really close to winning that tournament. It feels like there's 5,000 or 6,000 points out there in this run. He could do some damage if he gets that serve flying and if he plays a little bit more aggressively, maybe.
100%. I think it massively comes down to his serve. His serve is kind of make or break when it comes to these matches, hitting his spots, hitting his serve well and being consistent with his first serve percentage. He's got a very, very good game for the clay courts. And to be honest, there's not a surface that he's not good at. He's up there with these two players and he's probably the next in line to win a slam if he can be more aggressive on those big points. At the level that these guys are playing at, you can't go out there avoiding to lose. You have to play to win, and I think he's got to step up and do that, and he's proven that he can do it, just not on the big stage. So Zverev is my next favourite on the clay courts. I've got a couple of other outsiders I'll mention when we talk about predictions, but I think Zverev could gain on these two during this clay court season, especially if Greg's prediction is right and that Sinner can take some of Alcaraz's points away from them. That can start to level things out a little bit.
Well, I think also you look at Zverev. He's been to the French Open finals before already. Pushed Alcaraz to 5 sets. Again, he's 5-3 in the 5th set against Carlos at the Australian Open. We weren't talking about the youngest guy in the men's game to hold all 4 majors as well at his age. So he's knocking on the door. Haven't seen too many of his sessions. He actually kicked me off the practice court after he finished today, but he was friendly, but not so friendly because he knows we have him in the second round. So his predictions, I wish him well, but not this week if we play him. But he's always a threat. I mean, for him, it must be very difficult because he was the next big thing. Everybody's expecting everything. And he's been knocking on the door with multiple major finals in Australia, in Paris, in New York as well. I think the one in New York was probably the one that was the toughest for him to take. But his resilience is exceptional. Let's not forget he had Rafa in that 3-hour marathon where he got injured in the 3rd set and to come back the way he has. So he impresses me with what he does, and he is definitely in the mix.
Djokovic, I might take him, guys, if that's all right. I mean, we chatted a little bit on our cut show on Saturday, Greg, about Novak. He's pulled out of Monte Carlo. He's got over 1,000 points to defend, but as we know, points no longer an issue for Novak. He's not in there for points. He doesn't need to be world number 1 anymore. He's got that record forevermore, the amount of weeks he's been there. He's going to be the longest serving world number 1 for as long as we're all alive, I would have thought, pretty much. He's looking at Roland Garros and whether or not he plays there, whether he goes for the 25th Grand Slam title there. And from, I know you said, Greg, and I saw Tim Henman on Sky a few weeks ago saying, potentially it would be good for him to not play Roland Garros, which would be kind of unbelievable in a way for Novak when he's such a, his focus is so much on winning this 25th Grand Slam title. But I can absolutely see the logic behind him focusing on Wimbledon. If he had longer to prepare on the grass, get his body ready, make sure he's fully fit for the 7 matches he needs to win at Wimbledon, why not focus on that? I think it's his best chance to win the 25th Grand Slam title, and that could be a mic drop moment where he goes, that's it, guys, I'm out, I've done everything I need to do here. But for him to win in Paris against Sinner and Alcaraz, yes, he's beaten both of them in Grand Slams in the last year, but very, very tough with the movement they've got, with the speed they've got, with the endurance they've got. Novak probably can't hit through them as much as he would do on a faster surface. I think it's a tough ask for him to win Roland Garros. But I do think he needs to play between now and let's say he played Queens or Halle as a warm-up event at Wimbledon for this year, which he doesn't normally do. But let's say he did that. I mean, it's going to be tough for him not to play between now and then. So we're going to see him somewhere, Greg, aren't we?
I think either Madrid or Rome will be his first week off, then get ready for Roland Garros. And it also depends. If the weather's like this, it suits Djokovic's game. And you got to remember, it's not about points. It's about where he's seated. So he does need points to be in the top 4 because he doesn't want to have to go through, because to win a major these days, you got to usually go through Alcaraz, Sinner, and then imagine if he drops out of the top 4, he might have to play Zverev. He might have to play somebody else, or he might have to play those guys earlier in the draw. So for him, the important thing is keeping that top 4 ranking to give himself a shot at Wimbledon. So there's so many question marks. Never discount a great champion, especially on grass. Roland Garros, step too far, in my opinion, because of the physicality needed. And it's the interesting thing when you come back on tour and you're back in the locker room and around these places, you look at the athleticism of these guys in the top 100. Everybody is in phenomenal shape. Everybody's ripped. Everybody moves well. My generation, we had great players and great athletes, but I think the depth from, like, which we talked with Jamie Delgado was, you go outside of the top 10 and you go to 10 to 300. I mean, the athleticism and how much the level is a lot stronger. Pat Cash as well is the one who talked about that. And you really see that when you get back on the main tour. There's not one player that isn't, they have 2 gym facilities here and they're all warming up in the gym. They're all lifting. They're all doing after their practice stuff. And everyone has a physical trainer these days. Everybody has a physio. There's big teams for everybody on tour these days. So it is harder every year, between that level. We can have the discussion from 3 to 10. That's another day, which we've already done before on multiple occasions. But from 10 to 300, there's no question the depth is a lot stronger.
And when we're talking about the physicality, it's not just the physicality of longer points, it's the amount of shots you have to hit and the stress on your upper body as well as your lower body. And talking about that, we have Jack Draper, who's, sadly suffered from injuries recently. Kevin, could you give us the amount of points that Jack needs to defend this clay court season?
Yeah, so Jack got to the Madrid final last year. So have I got that down here? And I'm not sure about, but he's got to Madrid final last year, so he's got a lot of points to defend on the back of that. And he also, he did quite well on clay generally. He's got 1,150 points to defend now, I've written down here. So, that's a decent points total for someone who's dropped in the last 8 months, 9 months because of the injury. So he'll be keen to get back. And as Greg said, it's not really about whether you're in the top sort of 3 or 4 for Jack at the moment, but he would like to be in the top 16. He would like to not have to play these absolute world beaters at the top of the game in the last 30, outside of the 32 at Wimbledon or something like that. If he played, he could get Alcaraz in the 2nd or 3rd round of Wimbledon the way his seeding's going at the moment, which wouldn't be great. So he needs to try and get on court. Not playing in Monte Carlo this week again. A bit worrying that for me that his arm maybe isn't quite up to it. I mean, he had a few games in America and Indian Wells and Miami, not that many. So you would have thought he would have wanted to be in Monte Carlo. We don't really know why. He might be just preserving himself, making sure he's ready for the upcoming Masters 1000s events and then the French Open. But yeah, I would like to have seen Jack down there this week, and I think he can be a threat. He showed last year that his game is powerful enough to almost hit through the clay, and if he can do that again, got to the final in Madrid, that was an impressive effort. I think he's got a really good chance on clay if fit, Greg. And what are your thoughts on Jack on clay? It's interesting how well he did last year, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not surprising. I mean, he's a complete player. I mean, his backhand is so underrated. It's one of the better backhands on tour. He's got a huge forehand, big serve. And I think for him, missing Monte Carlo was a smart play. Start up in Barcelona, then you've got Madrid, and then you've got Rome. And that's his build-up for Roland Garros and a week off before he plays in Paris. He doesn't want to play 4 tournaments back to back to back because he's just come back. He's only played to 3 events. He's played Dubai, then he played Indian Wells where he beat Novak, and then he's played Miami. So that's 3. So again, he's doing 3 again, and he feels comfortable because sometimes Monte Carlo can be like it is right now, or sometimes it can be heavy, it can be slow, it can be really difficult conditions. Barcelona's always quick, Madrid's always quick, and even when it rains in Rome, it's still pretty fast. So I think that's a good play from him. On top of that, he just signed a new deal with a shoe company he's advertising, which we've all seen on social media. Andy Murray's gotten involved with the shoe company. Sorry, guys, I have no announcements about a shoe company, but if you want to join with me and partner on me, I'm more than happy to do. So, they also have stuff off court they're doing as well. I'm not worried about Jack so much. I think he's got huge potential. If he's healthy, health is his wealth. He's too good a player not to have the results. and he's a complete player, so he can play on all surfaces.
Just one for you, Ashley, maybe. Iga Swiatek this week, change of coach, Finn Fawcett out, and she's got Emma Raducanu's former coach. And what's it like when Greg as well? I mean, you've just done it. What's it like when you change coach? How long do you think that acclimatization period is? Maybe Greg, you can start on that as you're doing at the moment.
Well, I think it's about relationship based and whether you see the same vision. Also, it depends how big the team is, whether they already have a coach there and you're an add-on coach, or whether you're the main coach. How you relate with the physical trainer, and whether you guys have the same vision. Also, does the agent believe in your vision as well? So it depends on the age of the player. Iga's a different kettle of fish because of the fact that she's a world number one. She wants somebody to be with part of her resume when the agent goes out and looks for somebody. Have you been with another number one player? Have you won a slam? And that's where Francisco fits the mold, because the fact he was with Rafa when he won majors, he's been in the industry a long time. And that's what Iga's brief is usually to her agent. If you haven't worked with a number one or haven't coached a player to number one or a slam win, she's not even having a look at the moment. The other thing for me, it's all about relationship and vision. And before starting this job, they thought I had the correct vision, but then it comes down to the player being comfortable and making that choice. Now we're together. It's a very positive few days, and you build and you have a trial. And if the trial works well, after some go for a week to 2 weeks, some like to go for 2 or 3 months until an end of a period. So everything is different depending on the player. But, in our off-court cuts, we had a little chat about Iga, but we'd love to hear from Ashley on his thoughts of that partnership and with Iga changing coaches, because she hasn't been on the up since Wimbledon last year.
Well, the clay is where she can do most damage, in my opinion, and I think it's pretty exciting times for her, working with a coach who has worked with Rafa, who's one of her idols. She's actually got a very good relationship with Rafa already. You've seen in the past the interactions that they've had, that they're good friends, and I love seeing the clips of her on court with Francisco and Rafa, and just a few words that Rafa shared with Iga. You can just see that I think there's going to be a lot more than just the technical and tactical input that Rafa can give her. I think there's going to be a lot to be said for the mental side of things. Imagine hearing a tip from Rafa about playing on a clay court. She is going to soak that up. She's going to lap that up, and she's going to believe whatever he has to say, even if it's a load of rubbish.
Get a tip from Rafa on any surface, not just clay. I mean, come on. The guy won the French Open, Australian Open, Wimbledon, US Open. Any tip from him works. I completely agree with you. And also, it helps any coach, because if you're trying to sell something, you're going to do there. And I agree completely. A job as a coach is not just X's and O's. It's when to say something. It's the psychology. It's stuff outside of tennis, making sure they're enjoying being on tour, making sure they go to dinners, whether they see friends, and finding the balance when to be serious and when not to be serious. Have games with the team so you build relationships. So I completely agree with you say, Ashley.
It's complicated. It's very much more than just working on the tennis. It's everything outside of that too, and building a really solid foundations of a relationship where trust is heavily involved. You've got to trust your player, your player's got to trust you. And going back to Kevin's question about what it's like working with a new player, or from a player's perspective, working with a new coach, it's a very different level with what you're working on, Greg, with Petchi Pericard. But when I'm working with a new player, I think the first thing that's most important is I need to understand that player's history and what they've worked on to get to where they are and how they've worked on it. And it's different when you're working with a pro athlete, because, when Francisco's going to work with Iga, he's probably seen a lot of her history. He knows what she's worked on with her game. So I think it's really important to ask a lot of questions at the start of a relationship, because you're building a relationship upon trust, and once you have the trust in that relationship, then you're gonna gel, and anything you say or ask of your player, you're gonna get much more out of them. So Greg, I'm so excited to hear about the next few weeks and months, and I know it takes time for anything to bed in. We're not expecting to see big differences in Gio's game in the first few weeks, but I'm sure in the next few months you're going to make a big impact, and I can't wait for it.
Well, we've made some changes already, but you'll have to see them on the court. We can't obviously talk about it because you also have a confidentiality with the player when you work with them, and that's part of the trust you build up. And I think what excites me is the prospect that's there, and it's very similar. The advantage I have, as you say, see, before I've gone into this job, I've looked at all the statistics, I've looked at everything that's around, and I can watch multiple videos on every single surface, so you have an idea, which helps you a lot. When you don't have all that information as a coach yourself, it's much more difficult. But we still go to the past history moving forward in all those aspects. So there are similarities. I think sometimes we have a little bit more advantages than yourself when you don't have all that data information and being able to watch all those videos.
Guys, one player I want to pick up on, there was a lovely picture on social media of Iga Swiatek and Alex Eala down at the Rafael Nadal Academy. And as you guys know, every time we mention Alex Eala on this show, there's a huge reaction. Now, this girl is not one of the top ranked players in the world. She had a bit of a dip after her Miami Open points from 2025 came off, but the interest in her is just so huge. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see how she gets on a clay court. She's obviously done a lot of work on clay court because she's based down at Rafa's Academy. She's probably had the great man in her ear a few times on the court like Iga's had the last few days. So it'll be fascinating to see how Alex adapts to not just the clay courts, but also this incredible sort of expectation. And it's not pressure. She seems to be dealing with it really well, but she seems to be somebody that really is enjoying kind of being part of the tennis world, representing the Philippines as well as she does. If she can do well in this clay court season, Greg, there's a real opportunity for her to go top 20, which is what we thought was kind of where she should be aiming for, I think.
Yeah, she's like the Manny Pacquiao of the Philippines. He's like a god
Yeah.
over there with his fighting career, and they're always so hungry for a new superstar. She's a lovely girl. She's been at the Rafael Nadal Academy for multiple years. We talked about the serve being better. It's going to be harder for people to hit a hole through her. It's going to be much more physically combative. And as you said, being at the academy with Rafa on clay, he's spent a lot of time with her. So she knows what to do, and I'd love to see her in the top 20. She is great for the WTA. We need more stars, we need more names, and we need new people. And she opens up a marketplace, and people just love her. Anywhere around the world where there are people from the Philippines, they're always talking about her. What meal can I cook for her? What can I do this? They just automatically her matches sell out. And to me, she is a huge, huge positive, and I'd love to see her on this surface crack the top 20 in the world.
One of my young junior players visited Rafa Academy. He did a few days there at camp, and this was 4 or 5 years ago, and she was already a big, big name at the academy. And she was on the court, and there were people watching her practice, and she wasn't even a well-known name at the time. So there's a lot of hype around her, and I think so far she's shown that she can, deal with these big expectations. And I think you got to think pressure. It can do one of two things to people. It can crush them, and it can make them play worse. Or for other players, they can thrive upon it and enjoy the moment of feeling that feeling inside. That the famous quote is "pressure is a privilege." And I think if you can get yourself into a situation where you're feeling pressure, you've earned it. And hopefully she can continue in that vein. But she's an exciting player for sure.
The other thing as well is I have a great quote I always love. I got it from Paul Anacone when he was working at the LTA. He said, "You've got to be comfortable feeling uncomfortable." So for me, that's the best saying. So pressure is a privilege, and everybody thinks, okay, pressure is a privilege. You have those nerves in your stomach, and you've got to convince your mind, this is a great thing. This means I'm excited, I'm ready to go, and I can't wait. And that's where you find that balance and working it out.
Right, guys, let's wrap this up. We're going to pick 3 players each that we think are going to do well in the clay court season. Maybe one of them to win Roland Garros at the end of it. Greg, who are your 3 players? It can be 2 men and a woman. It can be 2 women and a male. What way do you want to go?
Well, no, I'm going to go 3 of each. I'm going to go 3 of each and put it out there. Alcaraz, Sinner is the no-brainers. Those 2 guys are up there without even thinking about it whatsoever. And if I got to put a third into the mix, now, this is the difficult one as well. Who are you going to throw into that mix? You'd think, is it Musetti? Is it a player like Zverev? Who's going to be the third guy? I hate to be really boring, but I'm going for the top 3 men in the world, which is Zverev, Alcaraz, and Sinner. Really boring. In the women's, it's Sabalenka, Goff, and I have a feeling this partnership with Swiatek is going to bring good results. So those are my 3 in the men's and the women's.
Amazing. Okay. I'll go women's first. Iga is going to have the clay court season of her life just through those few words she's heard from Rafa. No, I'm going to go Iga. I'm going to go Goff, and I'm going to go Sabalenka, which I think is exactly the same as you, Greg. That's really boring. I'm going to go different in the men's.
You should go the same, but we should take an outsider on the list as well, too. Let's go for an outsider in the men's and women's at the end of this as well.
Okay. For my men's, I'm going to go very different. I'm going to actually put Alcaraz and Sinner aside just because it's boring to talk about them all the time. I'm going Artifice.
Yep, very good call.
Right.
Sasha Zverev and Lorenzo Musetti. And an outsider, Mr. Mpechi Pericard.
Well, okay, that would be nice. I'll sign for that.
You've stolen my one, Ashley. I was going to pick him as my outsider, but yeah, no, Artifice was my other one as well. I think Artifice looks so good on the hard courts. I mean, is clay his best surface? I know we're going to find out pretty soon. You got to look at Alcaraz and Sinner to get to the final. And if Novak turns up, wherever Novak turns up, never rule him out. But I wouldn't have thought he's going to be a contender at the Masters 1000. He just doesn't look quite fully in the zone for those anymore, and hasn't really for a couple of years. But I think if he gets to Roland Garros, gets to a semi-final, who knows? One of the big two might get injured, might get sick, something might happen to one of them. Then he's right in the mix. And Novak is always the guy to watch, as you discovered with Pete Sampras back in the day, Greg. Never write off the true greats in this game. And Novak will. I'm pretty sure he'll play Roland Garros because I think he won't miss a slam. You know, I can see the logic behind him not doing it, but when it comes to it, the temptation to turn up in Roland Garros and play will just be so much. And Novak is the one for me. I'm with Ashley. I think Iga could have a very good clay court season. It's almost like resetting the brain, I think, for her now, because the game is there. It's just she almost doesn't believe it's there anymore, and she's admitted that in some of her press conferences recently, that she's kind of like not fully like confident when the crunch moment comes, and we never saw that with Iga in the past. So I think she's a real contender. Sabalenka will be desperate to make up for that horrible French Open final last year that was played in a hurricane, and Coco Gauff won. And like Coco Gauff is just an amazing player. The fact she was in the final in Miami when she's got so many holes in her game, and she pushed in the final as well, wasn't far off from winning it. So I think Coco Gauff, French Open champion, she's going to really fancy her chances back on a surface that she really enjoys. So lots to look forward to over the next few weeks, and we're really excited to see where it all goes. And obviously Mr. Mpechi Pericard as well, Greg. We think if he gets anywhere near the second week of Roland Garros, we hope you don't sort of sail off into that boat behind you into the sunset and leave Ashley and I on a podcast on our own.
No, I won't be sailing off anywhere. As you can see, we're still doing our regular shows twice a week, and we're loving what we're doing, the three of us as well. So I'll be continuing, but on tour with more gossip and more information than most. So that's the positive for the podcast. So thanks again for joining us on Off Court with Greg.
Before we stop, are we going to do our outsiders?
Well, my outsiders, you already took mine. I was going Arthur Fils was my outsider, so you already picked him for me.
Okay.
And in the women's game, it's kind of hard to pick someone because Rebecca usually struggles on the clay, and she's one of the ones I'd put in there, but I'm not sure who's going to step up in the women's game on the clay, whether it's Paolini, who's been hitting with Sinner. She's actually here practicing because most players live in Monte Carlo. So let's go for those before I kick off our show here and close it down. Ashley, who are your two outsiders?
I'm going, Paolini is a good shout, but I'm going Mukova in the women's. I think I love her game. She's got a lot of variety, and I think she can do well on the clay. And I'm going to go real wild card here, and Sorondolo. I think he's going to have a good clay court season.
So I'm going to go with Jack. I think Jack, if he can get that arm right, I think last year it surprised me how well he played on the clay court. So he's not really an outsider, but no one's talking about him at the moment, partly because he's not playing. But I think if Jack comes back, real good chance to get to the second week at the French Open. And because of my new star status in the Philippines, talking about Miss Ayala, I'm going to go for her to have a good clay court season as well. It'd be great to see. I believe she's only won one match in a Grand Slam at the moment. So it'd be great to see her get to the second week in Paris. And by the time she gets to the grass court season, the entire nation of the Philippines will be descending on the UK to come and watch her. So,
Kevin, I've heard you're getting a tattoo of her face on your shoulder, aren't you?
Exactly. I'll be wearing an Alex Eala t-shirt next week.
Our just numbers go up when we put Kevin Palmer in the Philippines. It's just unbelievable, isn't it? But I mean, really enjoyed catching up with you guys again. Enjoying being on tour here in Monte Carlo. If you're watching this live, you can see that I'm in the sun here in Monte Carlo. So please join us again for Off Court with Greg Rusedski. Thanks to Kevin and Ashley today. And please subscribe, send in your questions, and we'll continue to do our weekly show. So thanks again for listening and watching.